Let's talk about growing up on the farm. You had 7 sisters. Did you all get along really well?
Um, Really, I don't know. I as I grew up, or even got to be older, I would say my favorite sister was Emma.
Oh, it was Emma. Not
I,
Ruth?
well, uh, see, when after Ruth got a little bit older, she went to California to work, and of course she got married out there. Of course, as a couple, we were close to Robert and Elma, but then Elma was sick. But as as sisters, even when Emma got quite sick, well, I could no longer talk with her, but as long as I could, I would call her. I would say uh, there was something about Emma it was nice to get along with, even if she was quite a bit older. And as for Elma, well, Elma was right above me and Ruth right below me. Um, Being at that time, Wilbur and Vernon were kind of young yet, and Henry went off to school. So I spent a lot of time out doing field work. In fact, I was more like a hired man. And I remember one time the neighbor was there and they were discussing us kids, I guess, and I heard Grandpa make the remark, "She does a good job." That I could tell about my dad. Not that he favored me, but being I worked out, I was more like a man or boy.
Yeah, you said Henry went off to school. So did he get to graduate from high school?
Oh yes. See now, in those days, the girls, they didn't need high school.
Right.
And the boys all, well, Edward went to electric school. He was an electrician. And of course Henry went to be a minister. Of course, when Wilbert graduated from high school, he joined the Navy. And Vernon, he actually, I never did get that close to Vernon. I don't know, our age is different, so, and yet there's 7 years difference, so it made a difference.
And after he graduated from high school, he went to work on the railroad?
Well, he tried to farm, I think, when they got married. But Dorothy didn't, I can see, living out there in the country. But then he started working the railroad, and that was his job.
So you got to go to school. The months that you went to school, you didn't start in September. You had to wait until the crops were off.
There were only 7 months of school. But this is one thing I wasn't aware of.
I'll keep talking. Yeah, you weren't aware?
I wasn't aware of this. But when Judy Free did the record of the Berlin Township School, she went through the records in McCluskey. And what she found there surprised me. The records show that the eight years that I went to grade school, I didn't miss a day.
Oh, wow, that's great.
I mean, when I think of it, yes, school, you get off to school. And
how far from the school did you live? Did you have to walk?
Well, when the weather was nice, we walked across the fields, about a mile and a half. Oh yes, when the weather was nice, you walked.
And when the weather wasn't nice, Grandpa took you?
Well, the winter months, yeah, we had to. He hitched the horses on the sled and took us. Yeah, those were.
Oh.
I don't know. I remember a few things, but.
Do you remember when, when us kids went over to school there by Alvin Fowles?
Yeah, I'm following.
Alvin Fowles. And we went, did Grandpa build this cart and we took the horses? And do you remember that? How did we stay warm? Did you heat stones or something in the
Oh yes, even what I recall now, when the winters were bad and went with a sled, they would heat rocks, I guess, and then that was their heater as they went to town. Yeah, they were. I mean, it's no comparison come what it is now.
What were you a good student? Did you make good grades?
Oh yes, I would say fairly well. I was one of those. If there was a debate or something, and I remember one girl, I had a opposite. I made sure she's not going to beat me. I was one of those. Yes, I'm going to debate so and so. But and that was Emma Horning. But none of those. No, I'm sure there's none of those kids that I went to school with are still alive. I might be the only one.
So you graduated from the 8th grade, and no more school. Where did the boys go into town, into Martin to go to high school?
Yeah, they went to Martin.
And boy, that must not have seemed very fair for the boys to get to go to school.
Well, that was in those days. Women were, I would say, maybe even when my mom and dad got married, it was still man was the head of the house. Definitely.
Yeah.
And my mother worked real hard.
That Grandpa worked hard too, right?
Yes, but the difference between the two, between my mom and my dad was a jolly guy, different. Now, my Uncle John, that was Dad's brother, he lived entirely a different life. He liked to drink, he liked to smoke, and he was the ruler of the home. Where I can't really say that about my folks or my dad, but I knew that I had to kind of take Henry's place. He was but then I did a lot of field work and worked out in the field. In fact, I remember even one time at a thrashing time, I don't know, I was at that one place, and they needed an extra person to haul the bundles into the thrashing machine. So one day I even joined the thrashing crew and hauled bundles to the thrashing machine. I mean, that was a kind of a big thing. Here we have this girl, and I'm sure I was more than 16, 17 years old. But I didn't know any better. I was brought up to kind of the hired man.
You told me that Grandma, your mother, was the first woman to drive a car.
Yes.
And why did she learn to drive? Did Grandpa? She needed to?
Well, there too. She needed to drive to town to get a. That was one thing. Oh, Marie, doctor is driving a car. Fine. And I grew up to knowing no women smoked in those days. I can't remember ever seeing any women. And now it's just women drive more and smoke more.
Yeah.
That I would say is the big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Where no, that was a big thing.
Now you had a piano, and you said that family would gather and sing and stuff like that.
Well, yes, that was one thing about getting to it. Now Esther and Emma, they sang quite a few duets at different. Well, maybe at a funeral or something, or a special. They had a good duet. Of course, Esther was the only one that got piano lessons, which Emma told me later on. We could have. It was like, how come she got chosen to take piano lessons and we didn't?
Yeah.
But there was no more money, well, just one. And Esther really was the only one that learned to play the piano. But as far as singing, I know Henry had a good voice. We did quite a bit of singing, and Esther would play. Yeah.
So you had a piano. I mean, that must have been a big deal, right? Back then, to have a piano.
Oh yes. And
now Mary has all of Grandpa Doctor's documents from when he came to the United States,
Yeah.
but I don't know anything about Grandma Doctor. When did she come to the United States? Do you know?
well, I think they didn't come over with the same boat. They came separate. But how they ever landed, I would say, in New York and then come here to North Dakota, I have no inkling.
He never talked about it?
Well, by the time I was born, that really was old story.
Old news, yeah, nobody told you about it.
I know. Edward used to say, I'm so sick and tired of hearing Grandpa talk about that.
About the old country?
Yes, which I don't know much about that because that was old story then. Yeah, for me itself, I would be interesting to really have them tell me, but that's the past thing. I didn't know much about their coming over here.
Yeah. See, that's why I'm talking to you, because I want to know that stuff. So
anyway, there was one thing I remember Dad was saying. He was, well, I think he was about 12 when they came to America. And then he worked for this one family for a whole year, so his dad could have 2 oxen. And there too, for him to tell that story when I came born, that was old stuff for him.
yeah, he'd already talked
But
about it.
I'm sure that. But going back, Grandpa had a good sense of humor.
Was Grandma more serious?
Oh yes, I mean, of course, Grandma, she had to work hard with all the family, and in fact, I'm told that when Esther was born in August, harvesting time, and she was out shocking or helping, and she got labor pains, and I don't know whether Grandma came home and delivered Esther by herself, I don't know. But No, Grandma was more serious, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
When she said something, you better get busy into it. But I can't ever remember any bad lickings. No. So, but
So grandma also, she delivered all of her own babies, but then she was the midwife. She went around to other
Yes.
farmers and delivered babies to other farms and delivered babies.
yeah, well, now Esther often, evidently they must have told her this. Esther has mentioned this, that Grandma was out shocking or something. She got labor pains and they, well, she better get home and have this baby. One baby. Well, in those days, they raised a big family. They needed the help.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Didn't you have a neighbor that had 17 kids? I remember that over.
no, but one of the Sybils.
Cybils, that's what it was. Cybils had 17 kids, and several of them went on to be doctors and dentists, right?
Well, sure. I mean, they in those days they just believed in big families.
So what do you think about women having more opportunities now and they can do most anything? You think that's a good thing?
I feel yes. Even when I got married, I was pretty much told to.
Mm-hmm.
I am the boss. Not I am, but
Right.
my husband is the boss.
Yeah, I always think that if you had had the opportunity to go to college, you would have been a good teacher.
Well, I would, if I would have only had high school in those days.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them would go and teach you if they only had high school.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, I was like, this comes back to me about the only thing, like I taught Sunday school for so many years. And now, I guess you read that,
Mm-hmm.
for after 75 years, I get compliments from them.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of feel too, if I would have had the education,
Yeah.
I could have. But
Yeah, I you're very smart and you have a good brain and you know, all those things that you memorized and you have a...
Well, that is sure. Even Bible verses. I couldn't just maybe right now recite one big one after another, but ever so often they get to me or come to me and I recite them, like the 23rd Psalm.
Yeah. How about Proverbs 3, 5, and 6?
Yes.
I don't remember what that is right now. Can you tell me?
Trust in the Lord with all thy heart and lead.
No,
And that was the verse that was given to us when we were, to me when I was baptized.
Okay.
Yes, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Yeah, those, some of the, when I sit here, often another verse comes to me that I had memorized. But the 23rd Psalm, that I could recite the whole thing.
Did you, in church, did you go through confirmation?
Well, yes, to start when that was the evangelical church. We had gone through catechism.
Catechism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the church then was united. Now it's the Methodists, and there isn't much of a Methodist church here now.
Now, I know you said when you last year when Jordyn and I were here, you talked about games that you invented. You invented that you didn't have any games, so you and your brothers and sisters made up a game.
Oh, we did our own little. We played horseshoe quite a bit, you know. We made up our own little games. Played hide and go seek. Hide the thimble.
Did you? Oh, hide the thimble. Yeah.
I mean, no, we made up our own games and did our own little things.
Were you still living at home when the Depression started?
It was just about over. So we got married in '38.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you were at home
Yes.
through the whole Depression.
Oh yes, definitely. But at that time, depression was starting to get better. But
Did you have a radio?
oh yes,
Did you listen to President Roosevelt's fireside chats and things?
I can. I remember. Okay, now Henry was on a quartet, and he went to college
Seminary? You went to
seminar.
Yeah.
And I remember they were broadcasting their singing, and we did have a radio. But I remember Dad was trying to listen so hard to hear this. But that was something unbelievable. Here we hear him sing. He was in a quartet. Now, that's one thing about Henry. He was a good singer, and of course they were in a quartet through the college.
So he went. Where did he go to seminary? In Minneapolis?
No, Lamar's. That was
In Iowa?
Iowa, Lamar's, Iowa. I think that was the church conference or whatever.
I think that's where Nancy went to school too, didn't she?
Oh, could have been.
She went to school in Iowa, yeah.
So.
And where did Edward graduated from high school and then went to California, or did he go to school?
No, I really don't think Edward, where he took his electrician training, but he went on. Well, he lived in Michigan for many years.
Oh yeah, right. That's right. I remember when Dad took the train to Minneapolis to get his electrician's license. Do you remember that? We dropped him at the train, and he went to Minneapolis and he studied, and then he came back and he worked for Al Kurzweig.
Yes. Well, there are some things I remember, but some things are
Just
vague.
blank. Yeah, yeah.
I was going to ask you, when can you start remembering things?
Well, I think mostly I remember things, from pictures, like when we were in California. But I remember watching Captain Kangaroo. Remember, we got a television. I was watching Captain Kangaroo, and then some days I'd go to school, and some days I wouldn't go to school. And basically, I was 5, and you'd get really tired of me and say, "Go to school today."
Like, to me, both you and Karen, they're just years that are blank. Not that they were perhaps not good years, but I just
can't remember. Yeah.
Can't remember those.
Oh, remember when Karen was so sick and she had to go to Minot? And
yes.
Did she have radiation?
Well,
she had cancer.
That there too. She's taken after me, having so many things, and yet she's still here. She did have certain cancer surgery maybe 7-8 years ago, but when she goes for checkup, cancer-free.
Yeah. So, how did you meet Grandpa? How'd you meet my dad?
It was more or less through Esther.
Oh, yeah.
She was, there too. Esther became my aunt.
Yeah.
When I married Eldon.
Yeah. So the Heitmans lived close by, so the Heitman boys married the Doctor girls.
They married 3 Doctor girls.
And the Reimkes must have lived pretty close by, so Esther married one of the Reimkes, and
I was there too. When your sister becomes your aunt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's weird.
Well, In a way, it's
But that year that we went to Georgia, did you like doing that? Did you like living in Georgia?
well, it was nice. There too, I was with my grandkids. I got to know them a little. No, it was like Galen was in the service, but he did carpenter work, and he needed some help, so he called. Oh yes, which was okay. I think it was a good experience for me and for Dad to get away, um, and the weather was unbelievable.
Yeah, wasn't it nice?
We didn't have to then come back to North Dakota where it's cold again, but
And that was probably a good experience for me, but it was hard because to go drop into school and then all these people who had accents I couldn't understand what they were saying.
yeah. I hate to say this, but Dad was so. We moved, I guess, 5 or 6 times in a year or two. And when the last time when we moved over to the Filler Farm, I says, and I hope this is my last move.
Mm-hmm.
I was got to the place too. I'm getting tired of moving.
Yeah, but it was sort of fun to go to Georgia and see how other people live.
Yeah, and then the section where the white people lived with the dark people. There was no comparison.
Yeah, the poverty. Yeah. Now, you said Aunt Ruth did she graduate from high school? Did Aunt Ruth get to graduate from high school?
Edward?
Ruth. And then she went to California and got a job?
No, none of us girls graduated from high school.
So how did she end up in California? She moved there on her own? Or was she married to Wilbert when they moved?
I don't know how come she got out to California.
Did she marry Wilbert in
No.
North Dakota?
No.
Oh, she married him out there.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
That's something would be kind of interesting to find out. That how come she went to California? Evidently, okay. I remember that our neighbors, the Freilichs, moved to California during the Depression. And there were more people, quite a few people from North Dakota moved to Lodi, California during the Depression. And
then she married Wilbert.
And then
she married Reuben.
She didn't get along with this one brother, but she married the other brother. But there was no comparison either with Reuben and Wilbert.
Yeah, weren't they? They were different.
Reuben was the most giving person you saw.
Yeah, he was so generous, so kind and so generous. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's interesting how she left North Dakota and went to California sort of on her own.
How she went or how she got out there. Of course, when she got out there, I remember she worked for Dr. John Seibel. He was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
She worked for them.
Wow, that's a big hole. Maybe Jack knows how that happened. Can you tell me about your faith and what your church means to you and your community and the church? How has that sustained you over your life?
I felt real comfortable being a member of Bethel Baptist Church, and I think what I should let loose is I can't forget Pastor Lake. You know, he was an unusual pastor. Um, See, I really was here in the nursing home when he became my pastor. But of course, then I was still able to go to church quite a bit. But if I wasn't in church on Sunday, if he didn't come Sunday evenings, but Monday morning he was here, brought me the bulletin, and then to visit me.
Mm-hmm.
Even after he resigned the estate here, you know, they were to sell their house, and it took some time, and they got the house sold. He was no, there's one thing I got of all the pastors we had. I got very, very close to the pastors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yep, you did.
And there was one thing, I really was here. I could never invite the Lakes to my home.
Mm-hmm.
Were some of the pastors that came for interview, they stayed at my home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I remember Judy Free mentioned that too, you know, the teacher here. She says the reason she started attending Baptist church because I had invited some young people to my home. So that is not that I want to brag about or even think about it, but it strikes me what an impression did I really make upon people that after so many years they remind me that I was their Sunday school teacher. I says, like even Donna Bosey, I maybe mentioned this to you before. She was in church came to church one Sunday, and she had her niece with her. And then Jay was the usher. Then Jay says, yeah, well, she is sitting over there on the bench. Then she came up to me, and then she introduced me to her niece, not as Viola Filler. She says she used to be my Sunday school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that really struck me, and Donna passed away.
Yeah, so tell me about when you and remember you and Jay were counselors at Crystal Springs, and then one year Dad went and ran the candy store. How did you just decide that you wanted to go do that?
Yes, I went one year too, where Dad wasn't with me.
Right.
There too, I met two groups of different people. There were the country girls and there were the city girls. No comparison between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could, but so that was a good experience for me to be among the.
Remember they always gave out awards for the cleanest cabin, and
Oh, yes.
Jay always got the dirtiest cabin.
It.
That was funny.
Yeah, I mean those were good days, and like I say, I really had polio there, but I can't ever remember that affected me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I wonder, I didn't have any falls when I was, for as easy as it was me to fall. But
yeah, and that was, remember the cabins were built around, and then there was sort of this hill you went down into the candy store.
No, like Karen said, she did what every other person would do with two good legs. Right.
So when I know that your faith is really strong. So when you think about passing on, what's the afterlife look like for you? What does heaven look like for you?
Well,
what's going to happen?
Well, I'm sure it's Well, I just take for granted what the Bible tells me.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be no more sorrow, no more pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be glorious.
Yeah, that will.
Even if I'm comfortable here in my chair, sure there are things that you hate to, you hang on to life and you wanna give it up. But you get my age, it's time to say goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've had a, as you said, you've had a major impact on people. You made people's lives better.
Well, what really strikes me is when I got this letter from on my birthday from Delilah Hornbuckler. That hit me.
Mm-hmm.
What impression! That isn't all about the Hornbuckler kids. Now, I also was a teacher for the Delilah's brother. Evidently, he was an ornery guy.
Oh, yeah, remember the Hornbuckler kids
And then,
were ornery?
when his mother passed away, he lived in Montana and married a girlfriend in Montana. And then after the service, when there was refreshments, then he came up to me and he said, "I'm sorry that I gave you such a hard time." At least he remembered that. But the good thing was, his wife was with him, and then she says, "But we are both teaching Sunday school now."
Oh, isn't that nice?
I mean, she then came and says, "We're both Sunday school teachers." Yeah. Those are the things that, stick with me.
Do you remember, I guess it must have been the year we lived in Georgia, and then we went to see Uncle Bill and Aunt Edna
In Florida.
and then you and Dad went down to Miami, right, to see
his aunt.
To see Aunt Margaret. I didn't go. I've never been to Miami. I missed that, but I went fishing with Uncle Bill. That was nice.
Yeah. So, well, in a way,
I got a nice hat. I remember you guys bought me a hat.
it's
That was nice to be able to go see Uncle Bill and Aunt Edna.
it's to reminisce. I have many years and yet there's some years that are that when you were a baby, I just can't remember too much.
Mm-hmm.
As you grew up.
Oh, you were busy.
But
There's a picture of must have been at Grandpa Filler's house. And you are sitting there with Luella, and Ken is on her lap, and I'm on your lap, and I'm 6 months older than he is, so we were, pretty close in age, and we were waving. It's nice to have a cousin, my age.
yeah.
'Cause most of my cousins on your side of the family are a lot older than I am.
Yeah, so
The only cousins that are really my age are Jack
now,
and Sherman.
talking about my cousins, I just got a few. I think I have 3 cousins that are still living. That's the 2 Bender girls. And
Do you remember when you got when Grandpa got his first car? How exciting that must! And you couldn't all fit in that car, could you? Did you have to take turns?
Oh, I don't know how we sat. There was one thing I remember, though. President Roosevelt came to Devil's Lake,
Oh, he did.
and my dad was determined that he'd take his family, and we did see the President Roosevelt.
You got to see President Roosevelt?
Yes, at Devil's Lake.
Oh, that was pretty exciting.
And the thing that
Was that before he had polio?
no, it seems to me he had polio, but when I says that's another thing. polio shouldn't interfere in your life.
No. Well, that was pretty exciting. You guys drove to Devil's Lake to see
Yes.
President Roosevelt.
Yeah, that's one thing you had to give my dad. He was anxious. Of course, he himself perhaps was anxious to say I got to see President Roosevelt. And at that time, I had no inkling that I would also have polio. You know, President Roosevelt had polio and became president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Dare I go on?
No, you can't go on about that. Let's see. What else did you want to know? Anything else? And then, did you ever? You know, I was when you told me about that Aunt Ruth went out to California and then she got a job. Do you remember how she got there? Did she take a train?
I have no idea. I don't even know how come that she went out there.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not here to tell us
Well,
why.
maybe Jack can tell us. Yeah.
It's
Were there any chores on the farm that you enjoyed? Did you enjoy gardening? Did you enjoy putting in a garden and canning?
That was something that was almost a must. The garden and all the other things, raising chickens, milking cows, it helps to feed the children.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
I remember one of the things I remember is that in March we'd get the little chicks. They'd come,
yes.
and then they'd go in the brooder house. So March, April, May, and then in June, you'd go out and you'd hook one at like 8:30, and we'd have it
For dinner.
Yeah, you'd clean it and wring its neck and do all of that and gut it. Where did you learn to do that? Did your mom teach you to do that?
Actually, when I go back to the farm, I can remember ordering chicks, you know.
Oh, you don't remember that?
You just had clocks. You had your hen, they began to be...
You don't remember when we would get the boxes? They'd come, the boxes
Yeah.
of little chicks?
Yeah.
And then you'd put them in the brooder house, and they'd have those big red lights, and they'd keep them warm.
Yeah.
And they were on straw.
Well, that was... But I can remember seeing that growing up on...
On your farm, but
on the-
but you did
On
it.
your farm, you
On-
kept some
oh,
hens
yes,
that
oh,
would
yes.
make new chickens,
And
and some hens that would
And-
make eggs.
there was one thing that I was very concerned about that. Did the lights go out or everything okay? If I woke up during the night, I made a beeline out to the brooder house to see that the chicks are okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it was...
Because that took electricity.
Yes.
Before they had that, they had to make their own chickens.
Duh. Thank you. Yeah.
So, tell us about how would you would have hens that would make fertilized eggs
Oh, yes.
before the brooder house. Before
It was... I have to go back if you answer that question. Go back to where I grew up on the
Right.
farm.
Right.
In the spring of the year, there were the chicken, the hen, would become like a cluck, and she would lay her eggs and hatch her own chickens.
Mm-hmm.
And you better not destroy that nest, because pretty soon the hen would come with her baby chicks.
Mm.
But that wasn't anymore when we started farming. No.
We
That-
bought our chicks.
But I mean, that was something in its own when I grew up. How these clucks, boy, they were very devoted in having their nest and sit on those eggs until they hatched.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's...
Did you have geese and ducks on the farm too that you
Oh, we had everything. We had geese, we had ducks. Yeah, we had quite a few.
did that? But you didn't raise sheep.
Oh yes,
Oh, did you? Did you eat lamb?
we. Oh yes, there was one I remember have even a picture where I was feeding one of the little lambs with a bottle nibble. Yes.
Hmm.
No. This is way back.
Mm-hmm.
That's history.
Oh boy, that's history. That's 90 years ago or more. There's a picture. Or no, I actually remember when we had cows, and to clean the manure, we put it on the stone boat before we got the manure spreader, and had to take it out into the fields. Do you remember that?
Yes, oh yes. That was a good fertilizer in those days. You cleaned the barn.
4 months ago.
That was fertilizer for the land. In those days, you didn't. I gotta sneeze. You didn't buy fertilizer. There wasn't that such a thing as a fertilizer. So, way back. That's old times.
Yeah, I like hearing about that. When you I remember the story about when you went to London and you were riding the subway.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
There too. I'm glad you remember that. You go on the subway, and the old door would go open, and you better quick get in before it shut. Well, Dad and Karen got in, and here the doors were shut. Here was Ron and I and Jody. Well, a good thing Ron was there. He says, "Oh, we'll just wait until the train comes around, then we'll catch up with them." But if I'd have been there by myself, I'd have been, I don't know, scared. But that one I had kind of forgotten already. I remember that very well. And going to London was a big experience. What did they call that? Big
Ben.
clock that
The
they
Big Ben.
Big Ben, we
Yeah.
saw that.
So you flew out of Winnipeg, right? You drove to Winnipeg. And
We direct flight from Winnipeg to London.
Wow.
But on the way home, we made a stop in Toronto. Toronto, and
Oh, you did?
flew into Winnipeg. Well, we left over there and come home about the same time. I mean, for us to do that in that time, that was a big thing, very big thing. To say we were in London, yes.
And I remember that Dad wanted to go to Germany, but you wouldn't go?
Well,
He wanted to go find some cousins or something. Do you remember that?
well, no. It's like after we just did grain farming, the winter ones were okay then. Or even the summer months, there were weeks that we could take off. The farming wouldn't interfere. So, like I say, even the states of the United States, the western part of the states are large. We covered all of those. In my lifetime, I think I have covered practically. There's a few states I haven't covered. At least I flew over them, nothing else. But that was a big thing in those days, that you were able to go and see that much. But no, at my age, yes, I would say I've gone through quite a few things.
I guess you must have been in your 70s when you came to Connecticut, and we went to Maine, and we went...
Yes, I imagine. See, then there too I was beginning to be quite brave. I would take the plane and fly into Colorado, and Karen would fly with me. And so I still, after Dad wasn't here, didn't stop me from going places.
Mhm.
I still went to Colorado. Well, I could say
You came to Connecticut.
Connecticut, yes.
Mm-hmm. You went. Remember, we went to Boston and we went to Kennebunkport. We saw President Bush's
Yes.
main house.
So, again, going back as saying, being a polio victim, I can say that it didn't really interfere too much in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It was an easy thing, definitely not. But I feel I did pretty much what any normal person would do with two good legs, definitely.
Do you remember in my junior year in high school, I was the prom committee chair, and you had to run the kitchen. Do you remember that? And you cooked all that food for the banquet.
Well, yeah, there were a lot of things that I was involved in.
Yeah. Oh,
Definitely.
yeah. You were president of the Ladies' Aid for how many years?
And Sunday school teacher for many years. Yeah, it wasn't that I was, oh, I can't do that. I was involved in quite a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, you were. Didn't you out on the farm? Didn't you drive around and raise money for? You raised money for some nonprofit. What was that? Do you remember that?
Not that I remember.
Oh, I don't remember what it was, but I remember you were the. I remember, yeah, and yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was. So going back to, so you get a chance to from the grave, you get a chance through this video to say things to your grandkids and your kids.
Well,
What words of advice do you have?
see, like, I never had that chance to go back and remember too much of my ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I went to school with my cousins, John Doctors, yes. But otherwise, we were pretty much just in this one area.
Mm-hmm.
I never got too far away from where we lived.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get you to do is give advice. Once you're gone, you get a chance now to give advice to your kids and your grandkids. What should we do to live to be 100 years old?
Oh, you better not smoke. You
Right.
better not drink.
Yeah.
I feel this is one thing I must compliment my dad. In those days, you weren't a man if you didn't smoke or go to the bar ever so often. Now, my dad didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I compared with his brother, which was my uncle. He enjoyed going to the, but I would say my I don't know why, but I definitely feel he was a good example to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Of course, saying nothing wrong about my mother, she just worked her full head off to keep us together.
Yeah. So don't drink, don't smoke, eat your vegetables, exercise.
Well,
Now you're just giving advice. I don't think you're letting her give
Oh, she
me
told us
advice.
that the other day, remember?
in those days, everything was done by hand. There wasn't push the button, it'll get done. You got your exercise.
Yeah.
You didn't have to go and, okay, I gotta go and
Go to the gym.
go to the gym and get my exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But you did special exercise because of the polio. So
Well, yes, that I
maybe that's why you lived a little longer than your brothers and sisters.
that is still a mystery to me. That here was Elma, then me, and Ruth. Elma passed away when she was 47. And Ruth passed away with cancer when she was 52. And here I was 27 and I come down with polio and I'm still alive.
Yep.
I mean, that's another big mystery that it's hard for me to understand. That up until now, I've only one left, but I have outlived 10 of my siblings. It's
How old did your parents live to be?
well, there's one thing. My dad got to be 89. Now that was up in years.
Yeah.
And my mother passed away when she was 83. But she did have a stroke. But somehow I know that she kind of recovered. But
What were your parents like? Your dad didn't smoke and didn't drink, but what was his personality like?
Oh, did you miss that?
Or did you already
Yeah,
get
we
that?
already got
Oh,
that.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
we don't talk about it again.
Yeah.
I'll watch the video.
Yeah. Grandma
Yes.
was very serious, and if she said something needed to be done, it needed to be done. But Grandpa was.
well, sometimes I think I was Grandpa's favorite. Because my brother went off to school, well, I was the next one to work outside. I was actually more of a hired man than his daughter. I actually did a lot of work that was men required to do, because the boys were off to school, and so in that way, I would say I got quite a bit closer to my dad. Maybe I worked with my dad more than I would my mother, I would say.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask.
Yes.
Yes, I was going to ask it. When when my remembrances, I spent a lot of time with my dad. I remember going to Velva and getting coal with him, and he would take me, when he'd go hang out at Nelson's machinery shop, and where else did I tell you that he took me? But was that usual? Did little girls go hang out, with their dad? And was that? I mean, I really appreciate that, but I don't know.
I don't know.
I spent time with my dad.
Well, I would say yes. Dad perhaps showed more favoritism to his daughters than to his sons.
Yeah.
So, in a way,
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I remember doing quite a few things with Dad.
Went to Winnipeg.
Oh yeah, remember I went to Winnipeg with Dad, with Grandpa and Grandma and Dad and I. He took me to Winnipeg, and you didn't go, did you?
well, I suppose that I had work at home that had to be done.
That's right. Yeah, I just
Which grandpa and grandma did you go with?
Grandpa John and Grandma Louise.
No, you really got more close to maybe to Grandpa and Grandma Filler than Grandpa and Grandma Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we lived closer together.
Mm-hmm. And when I remember I had my tonsils out, and you and Dad went somewhere, and I had to go stay with her, and I ate ice cream and Jell-O, and she took care of me, and she made
Yeah.
clothes for me. But I don't, I don't remember spending a lot of time, with your parents at all.
No,
because
they
had
were further.
44 grandchildren.
They, I feel coming from a large family, I thought it was a good deal. Now, with Dad, with Elvin, it was just the opposite. That was just him and her, and Luella, just the two. And they really never were that close.
Grandma, I wanted to ask you, We talked about this last time we were here, but I asked you what you slept on as a kid at the house. I asked you what was in the house, you know?
And yeah,
Right.
but in the summer months we had this sod building, and we had 2 beds out there. I thought of it the other night. Should I even mention that to you? We didn't have an inner-spring mattress. We had our mattresses were wood, and whatever you call it, the mattress was stuffed with straw. That was our mattress.
And then covered with cotton?
Well, we had quilts or something.
Yeah.
But we slept very comfortable in the summer once when it got real hot, and we slept in that sod house. It was cool in there.
Did you have beds in your house though in the wintertime?
Yes.
Oh, you did.
But there too, there were only 2 bedrooms.
Did all the kids sleep in one bedroom?
Well, no, the 2 oldest ones already were gone, I guess. But if I recall, there was me, and Ruth and Elma slept in one bed, and 3 of us. And of course there was Wilbur and Vernon. I don't know whether Henry fit in there yet, but 3 of us in a bed, that was normal.
So all the kids slept in one room, and your parents slept in the other room?
Oh yeah, the parents had a bed further. Well, we just had 2 bedrooms.
Right. So was it your parents in one bedroom and the kids in one bedroom?
Yes, it was. No, that was just open. But we had a Davenport that opened up, and if I recall, there were 2 of them. Well, I never got to sleep, but that was in the front room. You had to open that up during the night, and then you closed it during the day. And now everybody, can you imagine the change?
Yeah, I can. I live the change. Yeah.
It's
And you had a coal stove in the house?
oh, definitely. There's a kerosene stove too, you know, that we used in the summertime, but in the winter, well, as hot as it was, but when it came down to baking bread, we heated up the coal stove with the oven, you know, to bake your bread. Hotter than what you can imagine.
Yeah, you didn't burn wood because you didn't have any wood, right?
No,
No trees.
it's but we lived through. Like I said, my parents lived pretty good age at that time.
So you cooked bread in the stove. What else did you eat usually?
Pardon?
What else did you eat? What else did you cook in the stove?
Well, like I said, we had a menu. For dinner we would have potatoes and meat, and for supper we had meat and potatoes.
Were they boiled? Like in a pot on the stove? Did you bake
Oh,
it?
we had fried, but there is one thing, we just never went hungry though. There was always food on the table. We ate. There was a lot of things made out of flour. There was knipfle and dampfnudel and strudel, but that had to be made too, but it was made out of flour. And there's one thing I remember, in the fall of the year, my dad would hitch up the wagon and go to town and buy maybe about 100 pounds of flour. And I think they used 100 pounds a week. My mother baked every other day. That was just, bread was really your thing that you fed on. Of course, we raised your meat. In the fall of the year, we did a lot of butchering, your hogs and your chickens and whatever you had.
Did Grandpa go to, when he bought the flour, did he buy sugar? Flour and sugar, were those the two things he bought?
Well, those were the main things usually that they would have to buy. Otherwise, I guess I mentioned it to you the other day. Grandpa went to town one day and come home with a bottom loaf of bread. Well, that was just like a cake. I mean, though the bread was okay. I mean, home baked bread was good.
Better. Did you butcher your own meat?
Oh yes.
Yeah, we even did
Oh
that
yes.
when I was alive.
Yeah. Did you have like
Well,
a stone you would butcher them on? Like what?
when we butchered the pig or a heifer or whatever, the butchering day was always you had the neighbors come in. They'd go back and get together and do the butchering. Then they'd make the sausage. And the sausage was good, homemade sausage.
When I was a kid, butchering day in the fall, this could gross you out, but Dad would have picked out, a heifer or whatever, a steer, and then he'd take the 22 and kill it, and then he'd kill the hog. And then at that point, honestly don't even remember, then everything went to town, and the butcher cut it all up, and then it would come back to us packaged. All the T-bones would be packaged, but Mom and Dad made sausage, so he would get the cat gut, and we had a sausage maker. And remember, there was garlic and onions
we
and
made
pork.
homemade sausage, and you had to smoke that.
How did you smoke the meat?
Oh, okay. I still have to go back home. How where I grew up, that we had a shed. Evidently, the smoking, they had a certain amount of wood to smoke the sausage.
And we took it after we made the sausage. When I was a kid, after we made the sausage, we brought it back into town and had it smoked.
So you'd make the sausage and then smoke it? You don't smoke the meat and then make the. Oh,
You
okay.
make the sausage.
You
and
make
then
the you made the sausage and you smoke.
So you had to have wood from somewhere.
Yeah.
You didn't smoke it with coal.
No. It was
Cold
wood from-
I don't know whether I'm. I think I'm a little confused about this. But I think after a while, though, we made the sausage, and there was a place here in Harvey you could take it and have it smoked. Yes.
That was when you were a kid.
Yeah, when I was a kid, that's what we did. And then when
So that was some of the improvements.
Yeah.
Oh, it was good sausage. I never had. I don't think I ever. Well, I don't remember having any sausage that wasn't, that Dad didn't make that wasn't smoked in town. And then, do you remember rendering lard?
Oh yes.
Tell me about rendering lard.
Oh,
Well, that was another thing. You didn't have any waste when you butchered a pig. We used the head, we used the tail, we used everything. But when I come down,
you remember how to render lard? You'd get all the big fat and you'd put it in a pot and you'd cook it.
you had to you cut off the fat from the pigs, You cut it in cubes, and you fry that and then you have your lard.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, there wasn't such a thing as going to town and buy Crisco.
Yeah.
It was lard. Even to this day, I still say, if you want a real good pie crust, use lard.
Or biscuits.
Or chocolate chip cookies. I have a friend who makes his chocolate chip cookies with lard. And whenever you eat them, you're like, this is so good. What is this? And he's like, it's lard.
Lard.
Yes.
Delicious.
There were, like I say, there wasn't a thing that was thrown away when you butchered a pig.
What did you use the tail and the head for?
Head cheese.
cheese.
Head cheese.
Yeah.
That's so nice. I don't
Yeah.
know the tail. I think the
It-
tail they must have
And
She
right
said they use the tail.
and right
What
now,
did you use the tail for?
well, I think that went in the same
Sausage.
place where head cheese went.
Oh yeah.
It's
So you wouldn't make lard from beef fat, just from pork fat.
just, yeah, definitely. But at the same time, the sausage, just using pig meat, pork meat. No, it was better to mix it with beef. Definitely. That's when you had some real good country sausage. You have to mix the beef and the pork.
So after doing all that, like how much sausage would the sausage last you all year? You'd have sausage for the.
Well, that all depends upon how many times you would fix it. But I remember even in the filler farm, we had 2 big freezers. And in the fall of the year, they were full with meat and with chicken. And that was our main support then, as far as buying meat over the counter. That wasn't not for us out on the farm, because, well, coming towards spring and in the middle of summer, we had the chickens. And then come fall, we had a butcher. No, actually, the work supplied a lot of our own food, you know. We had all our potatoes, and I used to can a lot of fruit.
Oh, remember peaches, Alberta peaches?
Yeah. And I don't know, did I get this from Vernon? Not from Vernon, from Jay, but he says we would be gone, Dad and I would be gone. They would go down the basement, open a can of jar of fruit and eat it. Because that fruit was only for on a Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And now everything is so different.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no comparison of the way I grew up, or even my kids. I mean, there was a lot of homemade things.
Yeah, I've told my kids the story of the first time I ever had store-bought chicken. First time you ever, you didn't raise chickens anymore. And it was, all the other kids were gone. It was just you, me, and Dad. And you fried chicken, and I picked up a drumstick, and I took a bite out of it, and it didn't taste like chicken. It didn't taste
No.
like your chicken.
Even here they serve chicken. I never ordered it because it is not like chicken.
Yeah.
It's no, the homegrown things. Like I made a big garden and did a lot of canning, especially the fruit. And the fruit came like peaches and pears.
Cherries. Or was that Grandma?
And plums, yes. So,
I wanted to ask you about
oh yeah,
the birth of each of your kids.
The birth.
Yeah, what each of them was like. So how did Galen's birth go?
Very, very sad. In those days, most of the women had the babies right at home.
Mm-hmm.
They called the doctor, but there was no move. So they took me to the hospital.
Where?
And in Harvey.
In Harvey. Okay.
And they had a foursome. And he actually had a mark in the back.
Oh,
I
'cause
mean,
they had to.
in those days, they didn't do any surgery,
Yeah. No C-section. You're saying.
So I was a goner for. They just put me out. I had no idea what was going on.
Wow.
So his birth was very unusual. Whether, I don't know, being he did have that bad mark in the back, you know, they had to force him. But
How long were you in labor?
well, let me see. It was during the evening, the night. It was during the night that they took me to the hospital then. Then I think he was born in the morning then.
Had you been laboring at home?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
No, what happened, my water broke. Well, that's a sign that it's time for the baby to be born. But there was no way. Now, I have no idea whether he was twisted, turned around. In those days, they just went ahead and they didn't tell the patients too much. But Galen's birth was very different than the other three.
So tell me about Jay.
Oh, Jay was the biggest one born, I guess. I mean, the weight. They didn't give me much either to put me under. But I remember.
Did you you went to the hospital?
Oh, yes.
Too?
I went to the hospital there too. But his birth was okay. I mean, it was natural. And the same thing with Karen. And I remember so well as I got back into my room and they brought me this little girl, the joy that came to my heart. I mean, it was just a blessing. And with Connie, I don't know. No, I kept this a secret that I was going to have this baby because I know people would, feel sorry for me. And that's just what they did after they found I had the baby. Oh, they felt so bad. No, even giving birth to Connie, having had polio, giving birth to her was maybe easier and more natural than any of the rest. There was no difference. I mean, me having polio and becoming pregnant and carrying her for 9 months, everything I would say was real natural.
What were you doing when you went into labor? For each of them, you know?
Okay. Well, at that time, we already lived at the filler farm when she was born. I got a thing now. It was in the morning, I think, that Dad had to take me to the hospital. And that there, too. The men, nobody, I mean, Dad never was with any of when I gave birth.
Yeah.
I was taken and that was it. You're on your own. But I can remember, I know it was a bad delivery with Galen. I mean, they had to force him.
Yeah.
And with Verna, with Jay, they gave me a little either to not really feel the pain, but I remember I did a lot of screaming. And Connie and Karen and Connie, I think we're quite natural, you know.
Did you nurse them? How long did you nurse them for?
If I started, no, I never nursed them very long, no. Seems to me I just didn't have. Now, there's one thing about Galen. When I fed him a regular milk, you know, from the cattle, that he'd break out in a rash. So we had to feed him on carnation milk,
Right.
buy the milk. But he really was allergic to that. And he'd run, a rash all over. His mind was, he could do things as a 5 or 6 year old that older people would do.
Like what?
I mean, his mind was good. You know, he could build an imagination farm, and he would wire it. I mean, that way, he had a very sharp mind. And, oh well, I don't know. But as far as giving birth, that was a hard case.
Yeah.
That him and I are still alive, I think, is a miracle too. So, well, anything else?
I was gonna ask you about when you stopped going to school. Did you go to school one day and your dad said, no, you're not going to school?
No. What amazes me, this Judy Freed took a record of Berlin District. That's where I grew up in school. But she says the reports in McCluskey showed that in the 8 years that I went to the country school there, I didn't miss a day. I had a perfect record for the 8 years. I never missed a day. And, well, when I go back, that could be possible. It's a school day. You get up and you go to school. And I remember the country school and I remember one year there were 26 pupils, one teacher. She taught every grade. But then we would learn, well, they had classes. We could listen in. I'm surprised that we ever learned to read or write.
Why?
Oh, it was odd, yes.
Just because you kind of learned by osmosis?
Well, if you were the lower grade, well, that was all in one room. You know, they had their class. Well, we could listen in and then learn from them. But
how far was the schoolhouse from your house?
oh, at least a mile and a half. Of course, we walked to school. Then we walked across the fields. You know, we didn't go section.
Right.
And there's no comparison of education now. What surprised that I ever even learned how to read. But I learned to memorize. We had one teacher. We had to memorize certain poems, and boy, she didn't let us go until we knew the whole thing. And there too, I would say, I learned a lot that you have to memorize. And it is surprising how I, later on in life, if I wanted to do a certain reading, I would memorize it. And it's mentioned in the paper, the write-ups, that I was asked, well, I had this one thing that I had memorized. Instead of reading the story or everything, I would get up in one of the programs and say the whole thing in memory. And I know our preacher's wife was so enthused about this. And she was on the program for a conference in Sioux Falls. And then she had asked me whether I would say that and go to Sioux Falls and memorize it. And I did.
Oh.
And I got so many compliments that they had asked me, wouldn't you do another one next year when the conference in Grand Forks? They did send me the article that I did memorize it, but it just never clicked like it did the two that I had memorized.
Do you remember what they were?
Well, the one was, Collie, your mother did send me a copy. I lost the copies, but the one was about a church in the world, going on. And the other one was about giving to missions. And this mother felt so proud that when the offering plate would come around, she could put in her money, and she figured, this is my missionary offering. But then it got a little bit touchy. Her daughter came and told her that she was going to go as a missionary to the foreign land. That was not her way of giving. And she fought that. Her mother fought that for quite a while. And finally, she consented. And, well, then her daughter kind of thought she'd give in. And the mother says, no, if this is what you want to do, you go ahead. So it was entitled, all I have I will give to you. But this was what she had thought. But when it came down to give up her daughter, she was quite willing to do that. So that one was my favorite one. And
Were they, these were in English or they were in German?
Oh no, they were in English.
Okay.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
That one I can remember whenever I did give it and recite it, like even in the church, people were wiping tears. I mean, that struck. But the other one was more in it would rhyme, the church and the world. Well, it started like the church and the world walk far apart. And finally, the world got hold of the church. So the ending of that one is it's kind of touchy too, That, but as far as memorizing, I still give one of my teachers, she made us give us a certain poem and the author, and you memorize that. So I would say I owe a lot to my teacher that she made me do this, or the class, not me just alone, but the whole class. So.
Did your parents read and write?
Well, they never went to school, but I'm amazed at what they picked up. Now, my dad could read German real well. This was one thing. The children, they have to learn German, Well, so when I went to school, I couldn't talk English. But when we went to school, we better not talk German. Oh. But through the year, my mother did very well. I think she had maybe a little schooling, but not much. But she could read German and English, but my dad, he tried hard to read English too, but it wasn't that easy. He could read German with no schooling whatsoever.
So you think their parents taught them?
I don't. I was just going back. I think I was one of the younger ones. My parents didn't talk so much for them to come here. They were only 12 years old when they got here.
Your parents?
Yeah, my parents.
Okay. I thought they were born here. They weren't born here.
No, they weren't born. Both my mother and dad were born in
Russia.
Right? Russia. But it seems to me, now my oldest brother, he says, I got so tired of listening to my parents and see, I was one of the youngest, so I never heard too much of their coming over here in the United States. So I missed out on a lot of that. Where my oldest brother, he got tired of listening to that one.
Right.
But
by the time you came along, they'd gotten it out of their system.
Yes. They didn't talk too much about that, coming over here. And the only thing I remember my dad saying, though, he was 12 years old and he worked for this one farmer for a whole year for a pair of oxen.
Oh. Do you remember any of your younger siblings being born? Do you remember their birth?
The only thing that I can quite remember yet of my youngest brother, Vernon, that too, we had moved from one farm to another. And I remember he was the baby. And when we got there, it was time to nurse him, and I remember seeing my mother nursing him. That I can still remember, and that's some 90 years ago. I mean, but he was just a baby and that was the place where I lived then until I got married. To that one place. Oh, those old-time days. No comparison what it is today. Definitely. I feel I'm fortunate that I lived this long and been able to enjoy the improvement of what happened.
Yeah. Progress.
Yes, it's big, such a big difference.
I was going to ask, so you spoke German at home.
Oh, yes.
Even after you got married, right? Galen spoke German?
Oh, yes. Galen talked German, yeah. Even now, a few words he will still remember. Oh, yes. German, when I started going to school, I couldn't talk English. And we had an extra test. When you go to school, you talk English. We had to learn English first. But as much as I know, we would pretty much talk German to my folks.
Yeah.
As long as I was home.
Even when you were older and they were older, did you still speak in German?
Pretty much so, yeah. So.
Do you ever speak German with anyone here now?
Oh, I'd probably say a word or two in German, whether they can catch it.
Like what?
Oh, wie geht's halt? Wie geht's halt? And then they're translated in English. Oh, the gate is okay, but the fence is kaputt. Well, no, for me to talk German isn't that easy anymore either. I have to think twice. This is what Connie, say my three older kids, they learn German, and you can at least Gail and he can pick up the German, and Shay too maybe. But Connie never, she kind of felt cheated because she couldn't ever talk German to her.
Did you just gradually start to speak English at home?
Oh yes.
Why?
Well, we still pretty much talk German to my folks. Of course, when we got married, it was English.
Oh, okay. After you got married.
Yes.
But Galen spoke German.
Well, oh yes. We still talk German to Galen, definitely. I don't know what. Oh, you can't fool Jay either on the German. I'm sure they still pretty much catch the German language, but I think Connie we never talked German that much after she came along. I don't know about Karen. I'll have to ask her. Can we talk German now while you're here? Even I wouldn't know. I've lost my German because it isn't used that much.
Yeah.
Oh, and people.
I bet you still know some songs or some nursery rhymes or something. Yeah.
Not in German. In English, that's another thing. When I did the girls' hair, in order to get their attention, I would repeat nursery rhymes to them. And they were glad. Chuck and Jill went up the hill, patch a pail of water. Chuck fell down and broke his crown, and Jill kept on doing it. You know, those things I remembered, and I kind of repeated them to the girls. And then they'd sit, well, they wouldn't know how I'd fix their hair to put curls in. Different than what this now. Yeah. But I don't know whether you could fool your mother on German.
Oh, she doesn't understand.
I don't think
She knows a couple of songs.
Yeah.
That she says Grandpa John used to sing or say to her.
Yeah.
But
No, I know she kind of complained to me. She says, the rest of them know how to know the German and I don't.
Yeah.
Well, and then when she came along, there wasn't much German anymore. We didn't talk German then. Oh, maybe between Ella and me, we would talk German so that she wouldn't understand anyway.
It was your code language.
Yeah. It's like I say, it's a big change when you live close to 100 years. Too much. So I don't know, just even some of the workers here, even the sister, the nun, she stopped in yesterday and she was anxious too about the report.
Oh,
I says, I don't know whether it's been on TV or not. To me, it doesn't. Well, I would like to see what it's all about, but I'm not going to be over anxious. They definitely got me down as the oldest polio survivor in the United States. I says, that's enough. That's all I need. Not that I feel so proud about it, but this is still quite a big hole.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
It was probably hard to avoid marrying your cousin by accident. You had so much family around.
Well, right. But you know, when Mary and Jay are gone, I only have a few nieces and nephews. You know, as his adults moved away, they had this big family, and I got quite close to Don. And whenever I had a bag of goodies for them, well, I just come and pick up goodies. Even now yet, they have picked up a few bags. So I'm still saving the goodies. I did give the last one to Jay, so that the boys.
Good.
I feel okay. Let you be responsible for that, and I imagine I better save a few when they all come for my birthday. if okay, I am more or less getting anxious. You know, hopefully it'll be okay to live 100 years.
You're anxious? Why are you
Well, it'll be another one of those. I'm the first one in the family.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have any cousins that ever lived to be 100. I mean, that's another big thing. But my biggest thing right now is that I am the oldest polio survivor in the United States. I mean, that is a big thing.
Tell me when you were little what would happen
Pardon?
tell me what would happen when one of the kids got sick when you were young. Was there a doctor that would come to your house?
Oh no. I can't even remember that. Well, the kids were sick and you gotta take them to the doctor. I think they grew up and got married and left home, and you're on your own.
Nobody was sick?
Well, I guess Karen wasn't that well. She had. Karen is another one of those that she's still here. She had surgery quite young. And as for Connie, I think she just was a healthy baby. I just, even me carrying her, being I really had polio, that didn't affect her. No, she's pretty normal.
I meant more when you were a kid.
Pardon?
I meant when you were young, when you were a child. If your sisters or brothers got sick.
I have no idea. I can't ever remember. My mother was the doctor. I mean, I can't remember going to a doctor.
Do you remember anyone getting sick, though? What would your mom do if someone was sick?
Well, being the younger ones, I remember my brother, Vernon. He used to get earaches so bad. Well, then, if I recall, she made something warm, and that had to be warmed on the oven door to put on her. No, my mother was the doctor.
So she delivered other people's babies,
Well,
right?
yes. And I think she delivered one of hers. Well, seems to me Esther was telling me that Grandma delivered her by herself. Evidently, birth must have been easier then than it was when I had.
What would you like us to remember about you? How would you like to be remembered? When we sit around and talk about Grandma, what would you like us to say?
Well, I hope they won't say Grandma was nothing but a sourpuss.
Okay.
But in my own self, I no. I enjoyed my grandkids when they came. Or I got a big story about her, my little girl.
This isn't stories about me. This is stories about you.
Yeah, we got.
Oh, it's about me.
Yeah. So how do you want us? When people talk about, oh, I knew Viola and she was so. What adjective would you put in there? What would you like us to remember you by?
I feel that I felt that I should always be helpful and taking care of even my grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they didn't want to get their shoes.